we go ahead and get started if that's all right with y'all? Notice I asked permission and not sit down and hush now. I know better than that. Looking at the book of 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul, as we know, he wrote the letter to Corinthians. He wrote him two of them. And this is one of the churches that he had founded and was kind of the, I don't want to call him the lead pastor in, but he was definitely one of their founding fathers. And he had a special place in his heart for the church here in Corinth. He starts out here in our part. He said, "For we would not, brethren, have you ignorant of our trouble, which came to us in Asia." Now, he doesn't specify really what trouble that was. As we know, the Asia that he is talking about is modern-day Turkey. And if you remember in Acts, we did our Bible study on Acts not long ago on Wednesdays. There was a whole lot of stuff happened to old Paul up in and around that area. Demetrius, the silversmith, had him almost had him hung out to dry. He had sicknesses. I think he was sick the first time he came through Corinth, and he was trying to talk to him, and he did minister anyway through his sickness. I don't know that he was talking about one specific event. I think it was more like a preponderance of things. I don't know if you're like me, things just kind of pile up. I have learned from my ancestors and my predecessors, I should say, not my ancestors, but my predecessors have taught me well to just put things back and deal with them later. All right? And eventually, when you do that, comes a reckoning day where you got to deal with things. And usually, it's right around the end of the year. And like for me right now, we got school closing out, getting ready to do all of our tests next week that I haven't done yet, getting ready to do all of the stuff at the Christmas play, and I'm about 60% convinced that we're going to do a great job with that. 60's pretty good for this time of year, isn't it, Lynn? I'm usually like, oh my. We've had several play practices where everybody's been here, so that's been a good thing. And, you know, things just kind of pile up around Christmas time. A little on the personal side here, today is a special day for my family. My daddy would have been 100 years old today. And I still miss him. And I think if we think back through the history of this church, where the Bible talks about that great cloud of witnesses, seeing that we're surrounded about by such a great cloud of witnesses. Anything in America, really, but getting it back to our family, there's some folks that we may or may not remember that are directly responsible for us being able to sit here today and worship God in this place and in this community. And it was not that long ago, 60 years ago, that this church actually kind of came into being. For 100 and something years before that, there was another church and another church before that. But for us to be here, I think we need to remember that everything we have was given to us. See, I didn't build this church. I didn't. I don't think nobody here actually laid a stone in this church, but somebody did. And I think we owe it to, before I get too far down that rabbit hole, let's just remember, kind of like Paul, he got me thinking today. He got me thinking about, oh, you think you something, don't you? Every time we get to thinking we're something, we need a little bit of humbling down. And this week, the good Lord has done that. I was privileged yesterday to go down to the East Tennessee Veterans Cemetery and do take part in that wreath laying down there. And I've done that for the last several years, but this year it got me, and got me to thinking. So y'all kind of be in prayer for me today as I try to get on and bring this lesson the way God would have it done, because there's a lot of things that the old devil is using. You know, the devil can use good things to distract us. The devil can use bad things to distract us as well. But God uses these things to empower us, and that's what we're going to see with Paul today. Paul had, as we know, a great missionary journey. He was kind of headquartered out of Ephesus, but he would go all of these journeys. He would go to different places. He would do all these amazing things, and he comes back through where he's already been, and he kind of builds people back up. And that's sort of what he's doing to the church in Corinth now. He had established that church. He had written them one letter already. But somewhere along the line, some folks had come in and started diluting the doctrine. And, you know, they weren't preaching direct heresy, but they were diluting things to where they was getting people confused. We got to be careful. We have to be careful even today what we stand for in our doctrine. We have to maintain a pure doctrine based not on opinion but on the book. Amen. If it's not in the book, it don't matter how I prefer to do it. But we have to maintain the doctrine, especially what the Word tells us about worship and how to worship and who Jesus is. You know, I'd mentioned to you last week, the largest, the most expensive Christmas tree ever made, ever put up, was in a Muslim country. And I saw another thing this week, and it got me thinking. My daughter's birthday was yesterday, and it's always been a thing of, you know, we have to compete with Christmas. And it got me to wondering, and think about this after I say it. Jesus must be really annoyed that his birthday is celebrated on the same day as Christmas. Now, initially you think, what? That's stupid, Tommy. Christmas is his birthday. Is it, though? Now, yes, it is. I saw a TV commercial the other day. Talked about it's the gifting season. The gifting season. It's not Christmas time anymore. It's not even the holidays. It's just a season of gifting. That's diluting the doctrine, see? That's taking Jesus totally out of this thing, and it's making it a man-made thing of, hey, let's see who can give the nicest gifts. Forget about salvation. Forget about the baby in the manger, because if you can do away with the baby in the manger, you can do away with the Savior on the cross. And if you can do away with that, then there's not just by one name by which you must be saved. You just have a season of gifting. Paul was focusing on some dilution in the gospel, in the doctrine. And he said one of the things that he was fighting against was a group of self-proclaimed apostles that claimed that they could see visions and claimed that they had these ecstatic convulsions of whatever, and they were having an experience with God. Paul was refuting that. They accused him. They said, you know, you don't even see visions. You don't even have episodes. Who are you to say you're an apostle? Well, just before where we get into here in chapter 1, he had talked, actually, I'm sorry, it was over in later on, but he talks about a time when he physically went to heaven. He says whether it was in the body or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. But he was refuting these claims against him that he was the false apostle by these folks who were claiming to be something they were not. Let's look right on in here, okay? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. He said, I wouldn't have you ignorant of our trouble which came to us in Asia, that we were pressed out of measure, above strength, insomuch that we despaired even of life. Paul was saying here that he couldn't handle it. He was tired of life. He did not even think that he could live another day because of everything that was coming against him, just piling on and piling on and piling on. And if you have never been at that point in your life where things have just piled on, and you don't know if you can do it one more day, I don't know if I can take one more breath, then good on you. But if you've been in those dark places, you know the only light that will really shine is not how strong you are. It's not how well you've been trained. It's not how physically fit you are or how mentally acute. It's that in all these things you are more than a conqueror through who? Christ, that strengthens you. It's not of ourselves. Book talks about that in so many places. It's only of God. That you can do all things through your own abilities? No. You can do all things through Christ, who strengthens you. Paul grasped that in ways that I hope I never get to be honest with you. Because the things that Paul went through, both mentally and physically, literally were more than any human would be able to handle. Verse 9 says, we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God, which raiseth the dead. See, Paul understood. He had a death sentence. He was a dead man walking. He understood and he embraced the fact that he had already died in Christ. You know, one of the ways that we got through combat and conflict was just to resolve the fact that you're already gone. And Paul had done that. He had resolved in his mind that I'm already dead. Any day that I have, any minute that I have is just to serve my God. Just to get this message of Jesus Christ to others. He didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to be heard as Paul himself. He wanted you to hear Jesus Christ. He wanted you to hear, this is what Jesus did for me. This is what Jesus can do for you. That was his ministry, not look at the things Paul can do. Oh, look at me, I'm Paul. Never came out of his mouth. Look at me, I'm Saul. Came out of his mouth a few times. And I don't doubt for a minute that the devil didn't remind him of that a lot. Hey, you remember old Stephen? Mm-hmm. You ain't so good. Who are you to preach Jesus? You killed a man for that. Who are you? Well, I can just hear old devil now. He ever tell you something like that? Who are you to say that? You did that very same thing. Come on, Tommy. It's like, yeah, and I have forgiven and learned my lesson. Not by me, but by the grace of God. See, if we try to do anything, any of our ministries will fall flat on their face if we are not sent and empowered by God. Because we try to do things our way. See, that's what Saul was trying to do. He was defending his faith. He was the Jew of all Jews. He was going to defend the faith to the last man. And these pesky Christians were not of his faith. See, that was his thinking. Till God showed him the truth. And Jesus enlightened him to the truth. Let's go on here. But we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in God which raiseth the dead. How many times you reckon Saul walked by Calvary's Hill? Got to think about that. You know, Saul thinking about Jesus, I am Jesus who you crucified. Why persecutest thou me? I wonder how many times he walked by Calvary and looked up there and he had to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jesus. I was part of that. I'm the reason for that. I wonder how many times he heard his own voice in the Sanhedrin that said, hey, we got to kill this guy. He is getting in our way of religion. Think he didn't have some ghosts that he had to deal with? Think he didn't see old Stephen's face? Especially when he was getting stoned that time. Thought, well, that's what I get. Verse 10 goes on to say, who delivered us from so great a death, and doth deliver, in whom we trust that he will yet deliver us. See, Paul knew and Paul understood that his life was already over. The life of Paul was now the instrument of Christ. The life of Paul was now the spokesperson for Jesus. And anything that Paul may have ever wanted to do in his political ambitions or his church ambitions or anything like that, he surrendered that to the will of God. And I have no doubt that he was more than willing to die for him. To say, you know what, Jesus, if I need to die so that somebody will believe, let's go. I am ready. Take me on home. Let's go. But he keeps God, he credits Jesus, he credits God for keeping him from a death, from the same death on the cross, from the same death as Stephen, from whatever death that was in his mind. I don't pretend to know what the old apostle was thinking, who delivered us from so great a death, doth deliver, still delivers today, in whom we trust that he will yet deliver us. He's done it in the past. He's doing it today. And he will do it in the future. That's faith. That is faith. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. He knew that God was going to take care of him. And if he did die, he was going to wake up in heaven. So he didn't worry about it. I used to tell my daughter to get her to go to sleep when we'd drive home from Fort Campbell to home. I said, baby, if you go to sleep, you wake up at home. Whew. And she would. She'd go to sleep and wake up. We'd be at Nanny's house, and she was all happy. Guys, when we go to sleep, we're going to wake up at home. It's nothing to fear, and it's nothing to have to worry about, right? Let's go. Even so, Lord, come, right? Now we're going to jump on to the end of the book. We started out at the first of the book. Now we're jumping to the end of 2 Corinthians, around chapter 12. And let me catch up with my notes right fast. In verses 1 to 5, Paul described a time that he was caught up into heaven. Hey, guys, come on in. He was caught up into heaven, and he described a time that he was called into heaven, given revelations that he couldn't speak of. Now, some folks will conjecture that this happened, well, he said it was 15 plus years ago. Some would say that that was when he was stoned and left for dead. Some would say other things. I don't know. He never says himself, so I don't know. But, you know, in Acts chapter 14, he was stoned and left for dead. But he didn't glory in that. He didn't glory in the fact that, hey, look at everything that's happened to me. See how big and strong I am? No, he said, despite of everything that has happened to me, God is big and strong. God is big and strong. Verse 6, he goes on here after he had described all of that stuff. Let me back up just a little bit. I meant to tell you something else. In chapter 11 over there, right before we get to where we're at, he talks in verses 5 and then 13 to 15. Paul relates that Satan's apostles accused Paul of being fake. See, somebody was slandering him. Satan's folks were in the church, and they were slandering Paul. They were saying that he wasn't, like I'd said before, they were saying he wasn't really an apostle. He wasn't really somebody. Not like me. I'm somebody. He's not. See how that works? So that's one of the things that he was defending himself, but also calling them out. He goes on here in chapter 6, chapter 12, verse 6, "For though I would desire to glory, I shall not be a fool." I would be a fool to look at myself and be proud of myself. I've done nothing to be proud of. Neither have those guys that are saying that they're apostles and I'm a fake. They're the fools. They're claiming to be something they're not. They don't even know what they are. They're making up this story and hoping you believe them. I shall not be a fool. See, he knew. He knew that he had been called up to heaven. He knew that he had spoken to Jesus himself on the road to Damascus. He knew that Christ had taught him and told him, and he knew that God protected him. He wasn't a fool. He goes on to say, "For I will say the truth." I won't be a fool. I will say the truth. "But now I forbear, lest any man should think of me above that which seemeth me to be, or he that heareth of me." He's saying right there, he's saying, don't think of me as anybody. I don't want to be the man who talked to God. I don't want to be the man who spoke to Jesus. I want you to hear Jesus. I don't want me to be nothing to you. I want you to forget my name and remember Jesus. I want you to forget everything I said and just remember what Jesus said through me. Verse 7 says, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations." See, he knows what he has seen in the past. The way that he's talking here, it almost sounds like he expects to see more revelations. He expects to have more personal interaction with God. It's almost like it's a daily thing for him. It's nothing big for him to get to go see heaven and to talk to God face to face. I mean, it's maybe not face to face. It's nothing big to him. I expect this to happen again, kind of like you driving down the road. You drove here, you expect to drive home. Jesus talked to me on the road to Damascus. I was called up into second heaven, third heaven, right? Yeah. It's going to happen again. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But I don't want to focus on that, he's saying. I don't want to be known as the guy that makes constant trips to heaven. I want to be known as nothing so that you'll remember Jesus. I don't want to be known at all. I just want you to know Jesus. If you're looking at me and all the things I'm doing, you're missing Jesus. And that's what he was throwing back at those false apostles that were saying, "Look at me. Look how holy I am. Look at all the things I can do." He's saying, don't look at me. Just hear the words of Jesus spoken through me. He goes on to say, "There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." To keep me humble, basically, he says, I was given a thorn in the flesh. Let me catch up with my notes here. Looking through the old Broadman commentary, I've heard so many people talk, oh, the thorn in the flesh that Paul had was this, or it was that, it was these other things. He never said. Scripture doesn't dictate that. People are making conjectures. They're saying, I've heard everything from bad vision, and a damaged hearing. I heard a limp, psoriasis, thorn in the flesh, itchy, heel spurs, anything. I've even heard depression. He was depressed. The Bible doesn't say any of that. There is a commentary, the old Broadman brings out a thing here that I'd like to read you just a couple of paragraphs, if you don't mind. Speculations here. Speculations as to what Paul meant by this are endless. If Paul has in mind Numbers 33:55, where the Canaanites were viewed as thorns in the side of Israel, then thorn is a correct rendering of the Greek term skolops, S-K-O-L-O-P-S, skolops. I don't speak Greek. I don't know what that means. It can mean, however, a stake in the ground that was sometimes used by Christians to remember the cross. It's felt by some linguists that in the flesh should be rendered for the flesh. Doesn't the Bible tell us not to get into vain discussions about things that really don't matter? This is very close to one of those things. It doesn't matter really what the thorn in the flesh was. It could either be a physical disability, malaria, epilepsy, distressing condition. If you want to look at it as for the flesh, and flesh refers to Paul in his mortal weaknesses, weakness for the flesh. It goes on to talk about how he could have been tempted. He could have been tormented by some of the visions of the things that he had done. Like I'd mentioned before, old Stephen, maybe tormented by Jesus, maybe seeing him on the cross, maybe by some of the other. I'm not convinced, and I don't know if you can convince me, that Stephen was the only person that Saul saw to death. I think that he had in his mind every intention to go to Damascus and kill a bunch more. I don't know why. Stephen, he might have been the first, but I don't know that to be the case. There could have been others. There could have been others. You never know. I like what it says right here, though. We must be content with acknowledging possibilities of interpretation here and the limits of our knowledge. It's important to take heed to the message of the Lord to the apostle. Grace blots out our sins and empowers the weakest of us for the greatest service. The thorn in his flesh doesn't matter. I've wasted too much time on that already. God got his attention. God got something that gets my attention all the time. I'm sure he's got something that gets your attention. But the thing that Paul was saying here is the thing that was that thorn in his side, even if it was from the devil, was used by God. See, in his weakness, he was stronger through God. If you're strong and you stand on your own strength, God is limited to what he can do with you. Do you know you can limit God the way that he uses you? If you think to yourself, I'm going to do this myself, God, you just got my back, right? That's dangerous, isn't it? God, I'm going to go ahead and do this now. You got me, right? That ain't the way you do it. That ain't the way you do it. If that door ain't opened by God himself, you best walk through a different door, sit still until God opens it, hadn't you? All right. Giving me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me. He credits Satan with this thing, but acknowledges that God has allowed it, lest I should be exalted above measure, just to keep me humble. He's a keeping me humble. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice that it depart from me. Who else prayed 3 times for the cup to pass from him? Yeah. In the garden. Yeah. God answered Paul too, and he answers him over here in verse 9. Verse 9 says, and he said unto me. He said unto me. Paul didn't say God gave me an understanding that. He didn't say that God helped me to understand that. God spoke to him. God speaks. You know, God speaks. Sometimes you hear God. Sometimes you understand the things that God needs you to understand. Sometimes God speaks in understandings. Sometimes he speaks in complete thoughts. And sometimes he just says things. You know, I was really tore up a few times over my baby girl. And I can remember just as plain as day, one time the Lord told me, he said, Tommy, I loved her before you did, and I love her more than you ever will. I loved her first. Sometimes when God speaks to us, we hear exactly those words. Sometimes we don't. But here, he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. You don't get it your way, Paul. My grace is sufficient. I know you don't want that thorn in your flesh. I know you don't want that problem in your life. I know you don't want that physical malady. I know you don't want cancer. I know you don't want to be sick. I know you don't want to be crippled. But my grace is sufficient. It ain't about you anyway. When we can start looking at that and saying, you know, God, make it worse so that you can be stronger. Wow. I don't know about you. I cannot remember ever praying, God, please make this worse. But that's almost, isn't that what Paul is saying? The worse I get, the greater God can be. And isn't that really what it's all about? Showing others how mighty God can be through my weakness. Through the things I could never do on my own. It ain't about me. It's about God and His ability to take care of us. His ability to overcome our weakness. His ability to overcome our limitations. Paul goes on to say, most gladly therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. The power of Christ may rest upon me. There's no other way to say that. Christ's power resting on you because you are glorying in your own infirmities. You're recognizing your weakness. You're recognizing your limitations. You're recognizing your sinfulness. I don't know, sometimes when I get caught doing something I shouldn't done, I kind of bow up and say, did you ever get like that with God? I know it, God, but I want to. I know it, God, but that didn't hurt my feelings. Well, I know it, God, but that shouldn't have done that. That's not glorying in your infirmities. That is standing proud and defiant against God who says you know better. And when we can humble down, that the power of Christ may rest upon us. Think back to when you were a child, just for a minute. Some of you might have to think back a little further. I'll give you a minute. I'll pay for that in one of Mark. When I was little, I didn't worry about stuff when my daddy was there. My daddy can whoop your daddy, see. My daddy had everything under control. I didn't worry about things. I didn't worry about getting bills paid. I didn't worry about food. I didn't worry about nothing because Daddy took care of all that, you see. That's where Christ wants us to be right now. He don't want us to worry about things like it. He don't want, and you know, we get older and we get things on us and we get to worrying about bills and we get to worrying about relationships and we get to worrying about things that we're not meant to worry about. As a little child, you know, if you remember how carefree days of your youth, don't they call out to you? Don't you just want to go back when, things were so fun then? Didn't have to worry about going to work. Didn't have to worry about none of this stuff. We just go out and play in the woods. You can do that still. If we rely that much on Jesus, just like we relied on our earthly father and on our earthly family, if we can rely on Jesus like that right now, we ain't got no worries. We still got situations, but we ain't got no worries. See, situations come, but the worries. Didn't the book say something about who by worrying can add 1 cubit to your height? Or 1 hour to your life? You can take some time away from your life by worrying, but you can't put no more on it. So why worry about it? If we recognize that God holds that old song in the Red Book, He holds the future in His hands. You don't hold your future in your hands. We need to recognize who's got their hands on our future. See? Here we go, verse 10. And it's going to kind of close it out here. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distress for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, then am I strong. When you recognize that you're weak, that's when you're strong. Look at all those things that he took pleasure in. Infirmity, sickness. Anybody happy to be sick? I get sniffles and I am miserable. Reproaches. Anybody ever had somebody talk bad about you? Anybody ever had spread a rumor about you? I mean, that. You thankful for that? Wait a minute now. Paul was saying, yeah, I'm thankful for the reproaches. Thankful for necessities. You know, Paul had said himself, I've been hungry. I've been cold. I've been naked in the jails. I've been beaten. I've had necessities. And I've had them met. Persecutions. He had some persecutions, didn't he? Old Demetrius the silversmith. That time that he was in that city that had let him down off of the wall in a basket. Remember that? They was ready to kill him. Had the city surrounded, didn't they? He got away in the basket. Let him down in a basket to get away. Tell me he wasn't persecuted. You ever had to go out the back door of a church? No. Amen? In distress for Christ's sake. Right there's America right now. We're in distress for Christ's sake a lot of times. You say Merry Christmas to somebody, get that little odd look back at you. What are you talking about? Christmas, the birth of Jesus. You know, I'd made that little comment earlier. The world doesn't want the birth of Jesus to be celebrated. They like to celebrate Christmas. Just leave Jesus out of it. Christmas is a magical time of year. Walking snowmen and talking reindeer with little red noses, and it's so cute. Big jolly Santa Claus. But don't bring Jesus into it. That's a downer. See, they don't look at it like I do. Because without that cradle, there could be no cross, and without that cross, I'm doomed to hell. As are we all. Because there's one name by which we must be saved. It's not J.C. Penney. But when I am weak, then I'm strong. Because it ain't him. It's Christ that dwells in him, right? That's all I've got for the day. Anybody have something they'd like to add to that? I like it when you